Good Sunday evening, everybody, and welcome to another show of the Top 50 Classic Adventures of All Time. I am your co-host, Chris Doyle from Goodman Games, and to my virtual left, as always, is my compatriot, I don't know what you are. We'll just say compatriot. We'll just leave it at that.
I wear many
Rick,
hats.
Rick Maffei. Rick, say hello to all the awesome people out there and
Hey, folks. How's life treating you, Chris?
busy as all get out.
Yeah,
Getting
I
ready
bet.
for the big move, getting ready for the big pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
Lots happening on our
Big
next
change.
show. Not that we're gonna, we'll talk about the next show, but the next show will be the night before the moving company comes and literally moves everything out of my
Wow.
house. So yeah, and then after that, I'll be streaming from other places in my
Interesting.
temporary housing. Who knows? Maybe the final show, maybe I'll actually be streaming from my new office and my new home. Who knows?
There
But
you
looking
go.
forward to it. I was just mentioning to Rick back in the green room I was driving out to where our new house is being built to drop off another load of games and game books into our storage unit because no mover is going to touch my collection. I had to find a game store to stop at because it was free RPG day. So I had to stop, and it was one of the most expensive free RPG days ever. Despite the free word, but it was great. They were amazing. Portal Comics and Games in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Shout out to them. They
There
did a
we
great
go.
job. So they're an excellent little store. I'm looking forward to frequenting them in the future. So how are you doing, Rick? What's up
I'm
with you
doing
in your life?
good. I'll have to look up Portal games at some point. Like I was saying to you in the green room, like last time I was in Bethlehem was for a scuba test many, many, many years ago. But I am doing good. Between this show and our last show, I actually sat down with a good friend and watched the D&D movie finally.
Oh,
So, and I give it a good like B
yeah,
plus or B. So,
yeah. It was a
yeah,
fun time. It was a
it
fun
was.
time.
It
Yeah,
was like, if you obviously if you're looking for a hardcore fantasy experience, it's no Lord of the Rings or whatever. But if you're
nope,
looking just for family fare, something funny, you
yeah,
know, Chris Pine has got a flair, I think, for the comedic, and it's just
he
good
does.
ensemble cast. It works. They hit all the beats. That lots of little Easter eggs for us geeks. So
Yeah,
I got it. Like people had told me it was good. It had a
yeah.
good rep. And it just took me forever to sit down and see it for whatever reason, but I finally got to it. So yeah, that was my recent development was finally
Nice.
sitting down and watching that. And I will probably watch it with my son in the not too distant future.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's excellent. All right,
I
now
think
we
it's
just got to
definitely
get
a
you.
good, parent and child,
Definitely.
introduce them to the D&D genre type of movie. So,
All right, now we just got to get you to watch the D&D cartoon.
yeah, right.
So
I have to catch up.
yeah.
No,
Ooh,
no fault of yours because you
I
gave me the
know.
set.
Hey,
So I got to
hey,
start watching.
that could be next year's show. That could
Hey,
be next year's show where we go through. There's 28 episodes. We go
oh
through
boy.
and we review every episode. Oh, you know what?
You would enjoy that.
I would way enjoy that. Like too much enjoy that. Oh, that's a thought. We're gonna revisit that. We're gonna revisit that.
And
So,
people are still talking about it because
oh yeah,
I just blundered into a YouTube video posted by somebody talking about Venger and how dark Venger is and all this kind of
yeah.
stuff. So yeah.
Oh,
There's
good,
clearly
good,
fans out there. So
good things. So, all right. So we are going to before we get started, just a real quick announcement. If you guys are not aware, we have a little backer kit campaign going on right now, called the Caverns of Thracia. If you're a 5e fan, that's OAR number 9, following on the heels of number 8, Grimtooth's Old School Traps. If you're a DCC fan, we got you covered too. We have the full treatment in DCC as well. Plus, we just have an absolute bevy of additional things that you could add on. We've blown through our stretch goals, and we had to hastily add 8 more stretch goals. So we did, and so we're having a blast in it. It is our second most funded crowdfunding campaign in our history, and we're hoping that that's gonna become the number one, maybe in another week or two. So, very excited about that. So, Elena already dropped the link in the chat, so that would be great if you guys check that out if you have not already. But yeah, we're gonna get on. So we are at this is the top 50 classic adventures of all time, episode 6. This is the middle episode, so we are on numbers 30 through number 26. And I think it's worth noting, since this is based off of the original Dungeon Magazine Top 30 list for the 30th anniversary that was done 20 years ago. So I figured it'd be a good idea to actually do a quick recap of what the number 30s through
Hmm.
26 were, so we can see if there's any potential crossovers or any interesting bits and pieces there. So
Yeah.
real quickly, I'll run through those. Number 30 on the Dungeon Magazine list was the Ghost Tower of Inverness, C2. Number 29 was L2. I see a theme already, L2.
Hmm.
The Assassin's Knot, which was a nice murder
Interesting.
mystery. Yeah. Number 28 was B4, The Lost City. We talked about that not too long
Hmm.
ago. I personally believe that should be higher on the list.
Hmm.
Number
I agree.
27, number 27, U1, The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. I believe that should be much higher on the list, but
Mhm.
hey, it made the list, so that's probably all
It
that
made the
matters.
list, so.
Yeah, that's probably all that matters. And then number 26, this one was, I think, a little bit of a surprise. WGR6, The City of Skulls, which I
Mm.
could not tell you anything about. I would have to do a reread of that. I own it, but I couldn't tell you. I mean, I don't think that's a good sign when something's on a top something list and
And
then,
you don't recognize it?
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't remember a single thing from it or whatever. But so that's interesting. So we'll see if we
That's
we'll see if we
interesting.
revisit that list at all.
Hmm.
Definitely some classics on there. And we'll see if
For
we've
sure.
got some classics tonight. So um anything to add, Rick, before we
I
jump right on into it?
No, it will be interesting to see how those crossovers work out.
Yeah,
I think obviously, as our list goes on, I think we're definitely going to have, I know for a fact we're going to have some crossover.
yeah,
But we've got some really good ones on the lineup for tonight. A
we
nice,
do.
really,
We
a
do.
real interesting mix too of modules tonight. So
Yeah, we're getting into it now. I mean,
yeah.
we kind of
Oh
had to
yeah.
get through the
Yeah.
the 30s and the
We got through
40s.
the fluff. Now we're
Yeah, now we're getting into the ones where
now we're
they should
drilling
all
down to
be
the really
they,
good
they
stuff.
they should
Yeah,
all be hits at this point.
for
So,
sure.
all right, so let's get right into it. So here is your number 30.
Number 30.
All right.
A
Okay,
favorite,
so
a favorite.
yeah, this is definitely a favorite. I3 Pharaoh from 1982. Obviously, Rick and I have both sung praises to this one in the past when we did our show on the Desert of Desolation series. But and I'm hopeful that the Desert of Desolation series is going to show back up on this list at some point. But even just the fact that this one was pulled out and made the top 30 technically
Mhm.
is a great sign. So definitely, we both believe kind of the strongest part of that
Yeah,
trilogy, if you will.
for sure.
Um, Tell us something about I3.
Sure. I mean, first thing that comes to mind, we always talk about what's the first thing that comes to mind. As opposed to a singular encounter area, I just think of this as the kind of the benchmark Egyptian adventure for D&D. I think it is the Egyptian adventure, Egyptian themed adventure against which all others are compared.
Agreed.
If you were to today sit down and write a brand new Egyptian adventure, people would compare it, I think, the old timers to this one, because it's just that's the benchmark it's set. It was originally published in 1980 by the Hickmans as part of their Night Ventures line, by what was it, Daystar West Media Productions. Then the Hickmans unfortunately were forced into bankruptcy, and they sold several properties, including this, to TSR. And then TSR picked up Tracy as a game designer, and the rest is history. It really kind of like, which is good for all of us, I guess.
Well,
So
yeah,
they're
I think
on
so.
their bad luck back then, I'm sure in the long run worked out for them and worked out for all of us. So TSR did eventually publish Pharaoh in 1982. It's a wonderful trap fest. I think it's got, maze-like elements, all the kind of trap food groups. But what I really love too is that it's got that wonderful free roam map with sort of sandbox elements where the players
Yeah,
can explore little ruins. And I think that hex map begs for the DM. If you have a creative DM who, wants to kind of roam a little bit and develop certain areas, you could really blow up that desert and develop a whole lot of independent ruins and things for really blow it up into a whole big campaign if you wanted. So that beyond all the traps and stuff, that's always been a favorite element of mine that I really like, is that sandboxy hex, area.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think of this as you nailed it exactly. It's the quintessential Egyptian D&D adventure. And like you said, it's the one that all the others are compared to. I've even tried to do my homage to them in the past.
Hmm.
It's just that good. The maps and traps is probably the
Hmm.
two things that pop up in
Yeah,
my end. The maps and the
maps and
traps.
traps.
Yeah, and I also, in my reviewing is for this episode, I'd forgotten that this was the adventure that I think the very first one. I'm not 100% sure, but it had those different sections for the encounter where you had like the trap,
Hmm.
you had the NPC, you had the monster, you treasure. And to a degree, that's been kind of carried forward to today in
Yeah.
in 5e. It's very much where you kind of break things down, where you can kind of see things kind of quickly. And that probably one of those first attempts where they're really trying to make it easier for the game master to run
Hmm.
at the table.
Yeah.
Might not be as interesting to read, a little bit more technical,
Yeah.
almost as a technical document, but really isn't that what an adventure is? An adventure is kind of like a recipe or instructions on how to
Hmm.
run a story. So
Hmm.
there's that fine line between wanting it to read good, I think,
Yeah. Yep.
for the fan, but also that utility at the game table. And I think
Hmm.
this one really really nailed it. And I think the Hickman names, I think we're going to see them again on this list coming up here. Just you look back at the ones that Tracy that did, and also that Tracy was just an amazing game master. So
Hmm.
not really a surprise there that a really good game master is a really good adventure designer, because that kind of goes hand in hand in my opinion. So
Hmm.
yeah, and one of the not first adventures, but an adventure that's really steeped in backstory.
Hmm.
You really have you have a the setup is a little on the you're kind of captured for you're kind of
Yeah.
your PCs are kind of framed for doing something that they might or might not have done, depending on what it is. But then, and that's great. And sometimes you'd be like, oh wow, that's a terrible start to an adventure.
Hmm.
There's not going to be any backstory here. But then there is this whole backstory,
Hmm.
and then part of the adventure is trying to find out and to kind of deduce all that backstory through going through the tomb, the pyramid tomb. And I love it. It's just
Hmm.
it is a classic one. I could run it. I've run it so many times. I mean, I've run it definitely 3 times at least. I
Hmm.
think I even played it. Yeah, I know I definitely played it once back in the day when I actually played D&D and not ran it. But yeah, it was great. Did you ever run it, Rick?
I've run it. I've never played in it as a player, but
Okay.
I think twice I ran it. I have not run it in many, many years. It's definitely one of the ones on this list that rereading it makes me want to run it.
Hmm.
When we originally talked about it, even back during our Talking TSR show, it made me, I didn't just brush up on, the parts of the module for the show that I needed to kind of reread. I really eagerly reread the whole thing and enjoyed it because it was that kind of, module for me. And I agree regarding the setup. I mean, I've definitely felt for many of Hickman's offerings, there are sometimes railroady elements in there. It just seems to be something that goes in his adventures to some extent. But honestly, once you kind of get past that short little intro and into things,
Yeah.
there's so many interesting encounters. And let's face it, a lot of these early modules, I mean, G1 basically had a go get him or you're dead, kind of setup when you get down to it. And
Yeah.
that was Gygax. So, I mean, that was a little bit par for the course. And, sometimes you just want to get to the action and get into things and then find out the backstory so I can totally forgive that, given all the interesting encounters and things that are in this book, you could totally forgive a railroady backstory, I think, to get you there. So yeah, just a wonderful. I love looking at those maps. There's
Yeah.
something about that gatefold, the colors and the pop out kind of elements of the different. It's just very well done, a very clear, understandable map, which is so important for a game master, I think. Definitely one of those modules where back in the day, you'd open it up and flip through the maps and it got you excited. You'd see all these different levels and you'd be like, oh, I got to get into this kind of thing.
And the maze.
Oh,
No, no, not
that's my favorite
no
part of it. I
Yeah,
think
no
I
fun
love
for
the
the
maze with
players,
the
but a lot
skeletons
of fun to
and
run
oh
the
yeah.
maze. Yeah.
And
So
some mazes can be kind of even a pain, frankly, to run for the game master, But that one I never found difficult to run for whatever reason. Again,
yeah,
I think it's just the maps were clear. It worked. I
agreed.
having put it in practice once or twice, it was totally a success at the table. And that, right, is the best
Yeah.
marker, right? It's the best test you can have.
Yeah, 100%. That I remember the floating reed ship,
Hmm.
which was basically like a kind of a puzzle in a way of like how do you
Yeah,
get over to it,
yeah,
and I was always there was that great artwork of them, the one PC swinging on a rope and hands breaking through the reed. So that was it, and the artwork, definitely that cover art, it got you in the
yep,
mood. You had the story at the end, the whatever they call it, the legend or something like that, where it's basically the pharaoh's backstory, the
hmm,
ghostly backstory. So just so much, just again,
yeah,
so much theme, so much
yeah.
just immersed you into the whole Egyptian part of it. And
Hmm.
and by the way, it was number one of an amazing trilogy that
Oh yeah,
definitely stands up to today,
yeah,
and it was a lot of fun, a lot of adventure,
oh
between
yeah.
those three covers. Keep you busy for a
Yeah.
while.
And that's sort of the beauty of it, I guess, in a way too, is you can totally run it as part of the trio, or you can run it separate. And it's
Yeah,
just, I've
yeah,
absolutely run it separate.
oh yeah,
And it
yeah,
totally can stand. You can absolutely take this book and just separate it from the other two
yeah.
and just run it as a standalone with the story and everything, and it works, with very little modification. So
Agreed.
yeah,
Totally
has
agreed.
stood
Yeah.
the
So
test. This is one that absolutely, to me, belongs to be where it is on the list or higher. So
yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll see if
yeah,
any of the others pop up on the list, and we'll see if the collection of
yeah,
all three of them pops up on the list. Because, like I
yeah.
said, when we were doing this list, we let any books. So
Hmm.
you could, so I3, I4, I5 can all be on the list,
Hmm.
and I3 through 5 can also be on the list. So theoretically, this
Yeah.
this one could be on the list four times. So we will certainly see. So
Fingers
excuse me.
crossed. As you know, I do not know the numbers. They're
Yes, you
hidden
do
from
not.
me. So
I'm the only one who knows
yes,
all the
he's the
answers.
only
So
one with Willy Wonka's chocolate recipe that's alive on the planet right now. So yeah, I told Chris at the beginning of this show, I just wanted to get fed the numbers as we did this, just kind
yep,
of like the audience, more or less. So I'm getting these very shortly before you folks are hearing them. And yeah,
yep.
I'm kind of hoping that whole series makes it. I think it'll be in there somewhere, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will. We will. So that was number 30, I3 Pharaoh. So now we're gonna come right at you with number 29.
Number 29.
All right. C2,
Okay.
the Ghost Tower of Inverness. So ding ding ding, we have our first crossover. If you remember at the top of the show,
Hmm.
this was number 30 on the Dungeon Magazine list, number 29 on our list. So
Pretty close.
that is almost an exact
Yeah.
crossover. So you can't really complain much about that. So this is
No.
the classic AD&D tournament style adventure,
Mhm.
1979 by Alan Hammock. Tell us about it, Rick.
All right, let's see. Well, as you mentioned, definitely a tournament module, and I think it feels like it. It has, for me at least, that White Plume Mountain kind of what I call
Yeah.
funhouse dungeon style, where every room's got a different puzzle thing going on, and maybe not always 100% logical, but you know, every area is sort of its own puzzle or challenge that the characters have to go through. So, which can be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
This book was originally the WinterCon 8 tournament adventure, which was in Detroit in 1979, and then eventually they published it. It was written by Alan Hammock, who's written tons of good stuff. The Slave Lord series, he wrote Boot Hill, and I don't know what else, lots of things. Um, but yeah, I think there's some really interesting creative rooms in here. There's one particularly infamous room toward the end, but there's a couple really challenging areas in here once the characters start going in. And one of the things I always thought was cool too was the map has this odd symmetry about it where you can feed into, from the different towers, you can sort of feed into the center I always liked that flow of the map. It was like a choose your own path kind of thing that,
Yeah.
later popped up in some adventures. And I always love when I see that kind of non-linear, design. So I think that's worth noting. What are your thoughts about this one?
So my thoughts on this one, I will agree, not one of my favorite adventures. It was definitely one of those funhouse style, like you said, where the encounters were they didn't, check your dungeon ecology at the door. This one's
Yeah.
it's not going to make sense. It's going to be a
Yeah.
collection of fun tournament style encounters that
Mhm.
they kind of hammered into a campaign module, sort of, kind of. But I think it really shines for its tournament aspects. And they
Mhm.
spend quite a bit of time. They give you the entire scoring system. They give you the
Mhm.
pre-generated characters. They give you the shopping list that you were
Oh
supposed
yeah.
to take a half hour of time to outfit your characters with all sorts of items. I think even magic items because you were like mid-level.
Mhm.
Um, they talk about the tournament setup. They talk about, the history of the tournament a little bit. They talk about how to run it as a tournament. So
Mhm.
there are literally pages and pages of the adventure that are just designated to the tournament aspect of it.
Mhm.
And then, kind of like some of the other original tournament adventures that TSR did early on, they kind of shoehorned it into a campaign setting, and
Mhm.
they did really steep it into Greyhawk lore.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right in that background, they drop all sorts of
Yeah.
geographical Greyhawk cues and everything, just a bunch of it,
Mhm.
and it just, the soul gem at the end, was that the encounter that you were talking about, or were you
Yes.
talking about
Yep.
the, yeah. So the soul gem is pretty awesome. I mean, literally, it just, if you're basically, depending on where you're standing in the tower, imagine a round tower room, and then it's
Yeah.
divided into 8 parts. Depending on what part you are standing in, like, you could get like sucked into
It,
the
it was
gem if you.
random, right? It was
It was
just, wasn't it
random
just like
which
a
zone
D8
it would
roll?
affect. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was random which
So
zone, and
so
you had to,
if you
like,
were
there
in
was
that
a.
piece of the pie, you were in
Yep.
trouble.
There was like a force field around it, and you had to destroy the force field to then either get the gem or destroy the gem. I forget what it was. Time was involved. There was time travel and
Mhm.
everything. And But yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, I mean, again, if you really, really enjoy that tournament feel,
Yeah.
that old school tournament feel where it was testing your skill at playing the game,
Mhm.
this was great. I mean, just very similar to White Plume Mountain. And it's funny, I actually I'd forgotten that White Plume Mountain is probably the classic Funhouse
Uh-huh.
dungeon, like that everybody thinks. I'd kind of forgotten how this one was very much like that. I would
Yeah.
say, very, very similar. Very, the encounters are very much kind of along those lines. Lots of good classic encounters in here. The
Mhm.
classic monsters, Umber Hulk. I think it might have been the first, Umber Hulk encounter in D&D. You had a great
I
Medusa
think you're right.
encounter. Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean,
and the
so
fire bat was new for this, right?
Firebat
That
was
was
brand
fire bat
new.
was
Yeah,
introduced
not
here,
sure he
right?
warranted an entire page
Yeah.
of stats and everything for a Firebat, but I mean that's something where, the Firebat. I mean, I kind of take Firebats for granted now, but yeah, this is where the Firebat first
Mhm.
showed up. So, but yeah, a lot of fun. There was a reverse gravity room with a
Oh yeah,
fire
I
giant
remember
throwing
that one well.
boulders, and yeah, crazy stuff. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of,
Oh,
yeah, a
yeah.
lot of things that are very tactical, very, you got to be careful where you're
Mhm.
standing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Probably would have been a great third edition adventure.
Mhm.
Not sure it would translate to a great fifth edition adventure. So,
Yeah.
but
That
it does have that the backstory, though,
Mhm.
very much steeped in Appendix N type lore. Kind of,
Oh yeah.
you got that mysterious things going on, time travel and everything like
Mhm.
that. So, no, it's a classic adventure, not exactly to my taste,
Mhm.
but still, certainly worthy up there. That cover is classic, I would
Mhm.
say, without a doubt. So, looks like we had some. Yep, the neon one. I always thought we got it bad. Oh, that's hilarious. That is absolutely hilarious. So, um, so folks, if you guys have any experiences with any of the adventures that we're talking about, drop them in
Yeah.
the chat. We'd love to hear about it. We'll more than happily derail our show to talk about some awesome things that that folks
Yeah.
experience in running these adventures. So
So just out of curiosity, Chris, did you ever take a tournament adventure and run it at home using the point system with your players? Do
wow,
that kind of
did I
thing?
ever use the
Sort
point
of
system?
tournament it.
No, I mean I ran the adventures because I know
Okay.
I ran this one. I
Uh-huh.
ran almost all of them. I don't think I ever boy, this is a great question. I don't think so because we would run our regular characters. We were not huge fans of grabbing pre-gens and running
Okay.
them. So it was more of, oh, this adventure's for 6th to 8th level characters. We're 7th level right now. Let's do it. I do remember running my group through this adventure and them kind of being meh with it. I mean, I remember
Mm-hmm.
back then I ran a campaign, but it really wasn't that much of a campaign as just a bunch of one shots kind of loosely strung together. It's like, oh, how do we get to this one this week kind of deal.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so I don't think so. Have you? I think you
Interesting.
have, haven't you?
I
You've run some of
have
these
with both this definitely my beloved Tomoichin
yep.
and I think at least one other for whatever reason. Sometimes we were a mix. Sometimes we definitely had long running characters, but there were definitely times when my players where for whatever reason the different players were there, this or that, and we just they would definitely grab the pre-gens and just roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on those nights, if it was a tournament adventure and they were grabbing pre-gens anyway, then I just went with the point
Oh,
system more for
cool.
fun, just to
Yeah.
kind of, be able to say, well, you have the most points or,
Yeah.
how well you did or that kind of thing. But I definitely did do it. I
Yeah.
remember some of the modules sort of give you those helpful little check boxes, in
Yep.
the end. And
Yep. Give a
I
scoring
definitely
sheet.
used
Yep.
some of those. So I
Yeah.
did do it,
Yeah.
which was kind of
Cool.
fun. That in a way almost made using the tournament style modules more fun for me when you were
Agreed.
applying
Yeah.
that system. But I agree. My feelings for this, and again, I share them with White Plume Mountain because I consider them very much animals of the same stripe. Definitely a love-hate affair. I love some of the particular rooms. Just I love the whole Soul Gem thing is so much fun. Just the name Soul
Yeah.
Gem, I love. But yeah, I definitely have mixed feelings as far as what I call the funhouse dungeons, because I do, as you know, from my own writing, I try to put an ecology into the dungeons.
Yeah.
So, and you're right, check the ecology at the door is the best way to put it for these. So,
Totally. Yeah. 100%. 100%. All right. So that was our number 29. That
nice.
was C2 Ghost Tower of Inverness. So we are
All right.
going to reveal number 28 coming up next.
Number 28.
All right. Well, again, now we just talked about a little bit earlier
Yeah, we
how
did.
adventures could show up on this list more than once because the pieces parts could show up and then the entire campaign or series could show up. So this is The Enemy Within, which is Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game. This is originally published started kind of in 1986 and kind of went through 1989. So this is very interesting because and again, Rick and I have talked about this one. I'm gonna own part of this. I'm gonna own at least number one.
Yeah.
I'm a completionist. I really, really, really want to like have all of these the collector's edition that Cubicle 7 put out. But anyway. So if you recall, I believe it was last week or the week before. I can't even remember now. One of the adventures, Shadows over
Bugenhaven.
Bugenhaven,
Bugenhaven. I don't know how you pronounce it.
something like that. Yeah, was on our list. It was in the 30s. So this one cracks the 20s, 28. So and it's always great to again. I mean, Rick and I are learning. Well, we've heard about this one. This is one of the ones where
Yeah.
unless you're under a rock, you've heard about this over and over the years, like
Mhm.
Enemy Within, Enemy Within. But you know what? Until I showed up on this list, I really started poking around and looking at this, and I'm like, I really, really want to get involved. And I'm not saying I want to go play Warhammer Fantasy role playing. I'm not sure I do want to do that, but I just love adventures so much that I want a copy of this, preferably collector's edition, volumes 1 through 5, with all the goodies and all the nice handouts and everything, because that's the type of person I have. That's like $700 though, from what I
Oh, it's
understand.
it's
Yeah.
dear, but I hear you. Since our last show, I did go out and buy the first book,
Did
which
you buy the
is
slipcase, the 2 books, or just the 1 book?
no, I just bought the one hardcover
Okay.
book by itself. I figured I'd start with that.
Yeah.
So and the latest version. So basically it's kind of like the first two adventures in a book, you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
And I'm really enjoying it. And for whatever it's worth, I think the redone version is wonderful. Good
Yeah.
production values, good
Yes.
notes in there. They've got what I might have mentioned last time, that I think they're calling them grognard boxes. They actually have boxes in there with little notes that if for some reason you're running old timers that went through the original, they give you little opportunities to change up things, which I think
Yeah.
is, and suggestions for that, which
That's
I think is a
amazing. That's amazing.
fantastic idea.
It
Such a
is.
good idea when you're reliving some of these older classics. So I mean, something to think about. So yeah, I'm totally enjoying it. I know it's not going to be the last one I buy. I bought
Okay.
that first one as a trial run because I did to buy the whole box set as much as I wanted. It was a bit
Yeah.
daunting. So just as a, verification, I told myself, let me buy the one book, sit down, read it in my hand. And if I feel as, good about it as I did when we did the show, then maybe I'll invest the money. And I am.
Okay.
I'm digging it. I mean, you have a solid group of authors behind this.
Yes. We talked about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Graham
mean,
Davis,
yeah,
Jim
Jim
Bambra.
Bramber. I mean, all three good
Yeah.
authors. Um, there's a lot of shocking amount, I think, for the time of DM advice in this that is
Yes. Yeah.
peppered throughout. Tons of detail about the setting and the politics and all
Yeah.
the stuff. And I mean, the one thing about Warhammer is, I could see it not being to everyone's taste. Like some people would like it, some people won't, because it's got what I call a grittiness to it. There's a sort of darkness, grittiness. They're not afraid to show people who are drunk. They're not afraid to go into almost like Cthulhu level of cult kind of activity, kind of feel Warhammer to me always felt a little like D&D meets Cthulhu, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I can
got
see that.
that feel to it, which again, some people would dig and some people will not. So, but I'm just enjoying reading it. All those details, I think, are just it. There's really lots of thought, tons of NPCs that the DM can have a riot with. So, lots of really good, just interesting details. And it's really, I think, worth mentioning that this series I look at as really one of the first series that really went more into event based as opposed to,
Yeah.
I guess, what I would call site based action, because most modules of the time were very site based.
Yep.
And here, the way this series starts off, and this book, it's very event driven, almost too much, almost to the point where if things don't go properly for the DM, I think it go right off the rails, so the DM kind of needs to be able to keep a rein on things a little bit to keep all those, events flowing properly and kind of hoping the players make the right decisions. It's one of those kind
Yeah.
of things. But I wouldn't call it railroady, but I think that it's conditional. I think it's one of those things that you need the right group of players, and hopefully that, you don't get any players that aren't too freewheeling in their thinking, because it could go
Yeah.
off the rails.
Well, I also think you need the right game master too, because I
Oh yeah.
think the correct game master, seasoned veteran game master, could keep that type of a storyline, kind of
Yeah.
more or less on the rails, kind of give the
Yeah.
illusion that the players are making all the
Hmm.
decisions in that, but still keeping things moving along. I mean,
Hmm.
so it's definitely not for the faint of heart, not a
Yeah.
beginner's things, even though, like you said, there's lots
Totally
of
agree.
advice here and there, and it's also like you said, the setting, it's very setting specific. It's very
Hmm.
steeped in the
Oh
lore and the
yeah.
knowledge of the setting. So it's probably not going to be the greatest thing to, I mean, you can probably pull the basis of the plot and put it in your own home campaign. But from my understanding, again, I have not read a lot of it.
Hmm.
You need specific things, specific places, specific, that
Yeah.
to really kind of make it work. So, and for me, I will probably never play it, but I will certainly curl up on a couch and read it, and just probably become very inspired by parts
Yeah.
of it,
Yeah.
and want to do, probably want to go do my own thing based off of
Hmm.
it at
Yeah.
some point. So
Yeah, no, agree 100% because just reading even for instance to like name one thing, all the details they had about the sort of fair that the characters
yes, yep,
attend, there was all these different, kind of almost all trouble that the characters could get into, different groups that were fighting or this was happening or that was happening. And reading that, you could take those and run with them and apply them to your
oh
own
yeah,
fair, your own
yeah,
festival, or something in your campaign. So just for stuff like that, a wealth of detail that could be taken out of here. Again, I totally admit I did not have a great familiarity with the enemy within before this show, just because I never did Warhammer. So I'm finally glad to be getting into it and seeing what all the fuss is about, frankly. And I think the fuss is worth it. I think, sometimes I don't always believe in following the crowd, but sometimes if so many people say something is good, you should check it out at some points in
Yeah,
a career, and this is one of those things that I think is
agreed.
absolutely deserved of its name. So yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. And good chit chat in the chat here. Yeah, Games Workshops that did a bunch of Call of Cthulhu stuff back in the
That's
day,
true.
so it all bled together completely. Yeah, and D&D meets Cthulhu, perfect description. So, yeah, so I'm really excited about this one. Right now, I'm in the process of culling my collection down. So I'm like not in a position right now to be adding two things, but this one's definitely going to be on a wish list at some point.
Yeah, you can't be
Um,
moving a slipcase right now. You have to wait until after you
no,
move, and then
no, not when
that
Dark Tower shows up too.
not
Like
yeah,
that's,
that's what I mean. You've got a
someone's
couple
gonna get
big
hurt. Someone's gonna get hurt moving books. Probably gonna be me too.
yeah.
Probably gonna be me. So, all right. So that was our number 26, The Enemy Within, the Warhammer
Nice.
Fantasy RPG. So, next up is our number 27. If I do my math right, yes, number 27 coming
Yep.
up next.
Number 27.
All right.
Wow.
So, D&D adventure B3 Palace of the Silver Princess, 1981. So this one, did it make the list because it's a great adventure? Did it make the list because of all the controversy? I don't know. Let's discuss. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see where this one falls. We did do a show on this one. This
Mhm.
was the one that we were like, I think we held off for 3 years or so. Not sure we were going to do a show on this one and kind
Yeah.
of pick those scabs, but we decided to just rip them
People
off
kept
right away
nagging
and
us
kind
to
of
do it.
get
So
into it. So obviously, this is a D&D adventure. And again, the history for folks if they're not aware, not sure that folks on our show are going to be not aware of what the controversy of this one was. So this one was originally released with some very questionable artwork. And from apparently, as the legend goes, some embittered artists had a little bit of fun, a little too much fun, allegedly. And there was some very very let's call it edgy, because I've certainly in role playing products and certainly media today, it would not be considered edgy today. But you got to keep in mind we're
correct.
talking
Yeah.
1981.
Yeah.
Back when the hobby is very much it's still in its fledgling state. It hasn't even
Mhm.
been around 10 years and everything, and controversy was already following it around, and it was already getting, it was already, TSR was already trying to make sure that it had a good reputation and trying to keep its reputation clean and everything. But so this adventure was released in an orange cover originally, and then it was actually recalled almost instantaneously. And allegedly, the only copies of the orange one that existed were ones that apparently TSR employees had. And also, I think they said something like one or two batches got out the store. Something the
Yeah.
story I was told that like 500 or 600 of them exist in the
Yeah.
wild.
That's what
Maybe
I've heard.
that they recalled a bunch of them, and maybe 100 of them didn't get recalled for whatever reason. So this one's obviously on the second market, very expensive, but yes. Plus, Commando Solo chiming in saying yes, and all the Satan stuff. Yes, the movie with Tom Hanks was already out.
Hmm.
You had the whole incident with the young guy from was it Michigan State University, or was it the Steam Tunnels? The Steam
Oh, the
Tunnels
whole steam
Institute.
tunnel
Yeah,
incident.
which is
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
movie was based
Which
off of
was,
after
yeah,
that.
Mazes and Monsters, I think,
Mazes and
ripped off of
Monsters
that.
was the Tom Hanks movie, which, by the way, if you've not seen Mazes and Monsters with a very young Tom Hanks,
Hmm.
saying you should, again, check your expectations at the door, but go see it. Go
Yeah,
see
it's
it.
worth saying.
Yeah, it totally is. It totally
Just
is.
as part of D&D history, I think
It
would,
exactly,
you know.
exactly. So, but yeah, so give me your what when you think of this adventure, Rick, what jumps out at you? What do you think of right off the bat?
I mean, I always think of the Decapus on the corner on the
Yeah,
cover. because it was the introduction of the Decapus, and it is a very, I don't know, for me at the time, it was a very beholdery sort of image. So for some reason, that monster and that cover image always sticks out to me, even beyond all the other stuff. Obviously, like
Really, on that topic, really surprised that that monster did not really catch on and
yeah,
become
I
a
know.
standard monster through all the rest of the editions, because it was
Yeah.
on the cover and it did seem to kind of be a classic. I
Mhm.
admit, when you look at its stats, it doesn't really do a whole lot, whereas beholders do a lot of things. But anyway, just a little quick
Yeah.
aside on that.
No, and I
But like
agree.
I would have thought, why did the
Yeah.
Flump become popular?
There's a
But
couple
this guy
monsters
didn't.
like that,
Yeah,
I have my own personal favorites too that just never caught on for whatever reason, or
yeah.
never even went far past the original Monster Manual, which was sort of a shame, but I guess that's another show. But I think of that, it was originally written by Gene Wells, definitely later the revised version, Tom Mulvey stepped in and heavily rewrote parts of it. Lots of things were changed. I think they used that opportunity to not just change the controversial stuff, but a wilderness section and map were pulled out. Still seems to be a whole lot of controversy as to, how bad it was, or how it was written, or, what Gene Wells was thinking about when she wrote it, and all these different things. So I don't know if everybody will ever know all that, but like you said, it's worth placing in the history of when it came out. Because at the time, I feel like, it was the early 1980s. TSR with D&D was really getting ahead of steam at that point, really starting
Oh
to
yeah.
come out with products, becoming more aware that, as opposed to like an edgy college activity, hey, this could actually be a family thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was, I think a lot of the stuff in here wouldn't be edgy by today's standards, but like you said, in the context of the day, it was a concern, clearly, for, some people at TSR considered it a problem,
Yeah.
enough to really jump on it. And thus history was made. So now,
Exactly.
whether it's really a great adventure, I don't consider it a solid adventure. Controversy aside, I wouldn't have it on the list where it is, or maybe even not on the list at all. But I'll let others debate that. Not a personal favorite of mine. When you put all, like I said, all the edgy controversy stuff aside, and you just look at the adventure for what it is, it didn't knock my socks off. Um, but
Yeah.
that's my field. But again, there was some interesting things in there. There were
Oh yeah.
optional, like some optional rules, like optional morale rules were presented
Yeah.
in there, and some
Totally.
things. So
Yeah.
yeah, like most adventures, there are good nuggets in there if you search. So
Yeah. So this was one that, upon my reread, I actually gained more of an appreciation
okay.
for. I did run it back in the day. I actually run it several times. It is kind of a
Oh wow.
classic
Okay.
dungeon crawl.
Uh-huh.
But a couple things kind of set it aside. First of all, there was actually a pretty detailed backstory. Now, the backstory didn't totally make sense. There was definitely some disjointed parts of it. Like, for example, a lawful knight wearing black armor
Yes.
riding a white
A drag.
dragon,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Where
he's a good guy. That's a little confusing, but back then,
yeah.
I don't know if the dragons, the chromatic dragons, were as pictured as evil as they are these days. Like, it's very
Yeah.
clear now that the chromatic dragons are the bad guys. Back then in basic D&D, I think the chromatic dragons were, I think reds were always bad, but I think the others had different alignments, if I recall. But that aside, but it had a very compelling plot.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the adventure didn't really back it up, but
Hmm.
the setting the stage was really good. What I
Yeah.
really loved about the adventure was they had this programmed part in the beginning, which was basically a choose your own adventure style.
Hmm.
They took the first four encounter areas and made it a choose your own adventure style to basically teach you how to be a game master,
Yeah.
also teach you how to be a player, but mostly teach you how to be a game master, to kind of
Hmm.
limit the choices the players could make so you could understand of what you were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
They designated 5 pages to that for four encounter areas. And then there was another, like, probably, I don't know, 50, 60 encounters after that. But it was very interesting. And there's a whole section on, how to be a game master and all those things. And back then in 1981, there wasn't a whole lot of how to
No.
be a game master
No.
going on. It was just assumed you knew how to do it.
Yeah.
So I actually really liked that part of it. I love the premise and I love the backstory. It was almost like you got all that, and then you got kind of a, I won't say a bland adventure site after that, but there were some bits and pieces here and there. but that could have just been a casualty of all the rewrites too.
Yeah.
I mean, it could very well be that, you know, when you go in there and you mess with so many things, but you're trying. I've done it where you're
Hmm.
trying to keep the original intent, but you're trying
Yeah.
to rework things and stuff. At the end of the day, sometimes it doesn't
Oh
always
yeah.
work. So that can
No.
certainly be a factor.
We've both done that sort of revision work on other people, working off what another person has
Yeah.
written, and that's a challenge. And you raised a really good point, like, me thinking on a meta level beyond this adventure itself, when I look at like 1981, 1982, that area when this and like Pharaoh came out, that was definitely really a period where in a lot of these adventures you saw them trying all kinds of different techniques to make the DM's job easier after,
Yes. Yep.
leaving the DM to their whims for a long time. Once it hit the early 80s, and sometimes some of these techniques were not successful and sometimes they were, but like you said, whether it was isolating elements as far as trick and trap or as far as choose your own adventure, like that's one thing that really stands out to me. When you look at the early 80s, a lot of these modules, there's several adventures that all kind of took a stab at this, like how are we going to try to do something to make the DM's life easier? So to me, that alone is kind of a historical development for the adventures of that time of the early 80s.
Agreed.
They definitely became aware, hey, we got to make the DM's life easier. How can we do it? And then a whole bunch of, like, I consider experiments started in these books,
Yeah.
to try to see how they could do that. And it's really fascinating seeing how the different authors approach it.
Yeah, excellent. So cool. So that is B3 number 27, B3 Palace of the Silver Princess. So we've got one more to
One
reveal
more.
for tonight. So tonight, so our next selection is going to be number 26, and then we are going to be starting next time, we are going to be in the top 25. Very exciting. So here we come with number 26.
Number 26.
All right,
All right. I knew this
DL1
one was
Dragons
coming.
of Despair. So,
Yeah.
not surprised at all that
No.
this made the list.
No.
1984, AD&D. I think a lot of people might have put this one on the list, kind of for the whole Dragonlance series. I mean, when I do remember when I got all the votes in, some people did put the whole Dragonlance saga.
Mhm.
I counted that as one vote for that, and then some people actually, well, a fair amount of people actually put DL1 down, and I own every single
Oh, wow.
DL adventure, and I can attest this is probably the best one. I think DL8 is the one that's got the maps and has the battle system part of it, and that one's pretty good too, but it's not a traditional adventure per se.
Hmm.
This one is a traditional adventure, and it's the one that kicks it all off.
Yeah.
And it's, again, it had a novel, it had comic books, I believe, done on it. I'm going out in there. There was an animated movie, I believe it was released right to DVD.
Mhm.
I'm gonna say in the maybe the early 2000s, something like that. Not sure if that's still out there. I know I own a copy of it, and I watched it. It was
Oh,
okay.
wow.
It was okay. But and they actually had some pretty good names. I believe Kiefer Sutherland, I believe, was Tanis Half Elven, if I'm not mistaken. I could be getting that completely wrong. I'm sure somebody will correct me. The internet will probably shame me. But anyway, there was a decent cast on that. So not surprising this makes it. So this was the one that kicked off Dragonlance. And I
Hmm.
think we have a graphic on there for the teaser in Dragon magazine where they just said coming soon, Dragonlance, I
Yes.
think it was basically. So Philaden, if
Yeah.
you want to pop that up, that would be awesome. My gaming group read the novel, and the novel and the first adventure are very much, it's basically a retelling of the adventure. So, and I found that out pretty quickly. If I recall, when Dragonlance first came out, I had no interest in it, no
Mhm.
interest. And then the novel came out. My girlfriend at the time read it. My best friend read it. I think my whole gaming group read it. So then I had to read it because
You
they
had to
all
read
said it
it.
was amazing. And I said, "Oh wow, there's modules based on this." So I bought the module, and then I was like,
There
"Wow,
you
I
go.
really would have loved running this," but at that point, it was kind of too late. But it was great. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so many good parts of it. You definitely felt like it was D&D,
Mhm.
but you felt like it was a different world. There was
Yeah.
a couple differences in it. It felt like a different world. There are no clerics,
Yeah.
until the end of the first adventure. You know, So then clerics come. So that was kind of interesting. The whole magic system was there, but they handled it differently. You
Yeah.
didn't have halflings, you had Kender,
Mhm.
so it was familiar, but it was different. And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
was really good. And the way that they rolled it out and everything, it was kind of like a multiverse approach and a
Hmm.
cinematic feel to it and
Oh yeah.
everything. And it was great. So do you have any recollections on this adventure, Rick?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, if nothing, I knew it would show up on the list. I was not a huge Dragonlance. I didn't read any of the novels, so I think because of that, I was not a huge Dragonlance module buyer at the time. I knew this one would pop up because of all the Dragonlance modules. This is, I think, the one I hear the name brought up the
Yep.
most as being the most significant. The fact that you said, like you said, that it had this whole kind of media thing around it, this whole ecosystem built of novels and such built around it, which later we saw done with other products, but this was really the first that kind of had that whole
Yeah.
and as we flashed up on the screen before, they took an interesting approach because in Dragon 81 and Dragon 81 and 82 in both, and I think that same issue of Dragon that month, then they ran like a short story. It was like something
Yeah,
the
I believe
twins,
so.
it
Yep.
was like, so you had a Dragonlance story, and then they kind of, I think, gave it like a full page ad or a larger ad, kind of at least telling you kind of what the story was, but the 2 months before you just had these little teasers. So it's kind of interesting. And like you said, they definitely wanted to veer off the usual D&D path because,
Yeah,
no clerics, at least in the beginning. Kender are very different than halflings,
very
you
much
know,
so.
no orcs, like just a lot of these conventions, they said nope. And yet there's still totally enough there, for D&D folks to anchor on and still feel like things are kind of familiar where they're not just thrown in a completely different universe, and a very compelling, I think, backstory. And certainly if you read the novels, I can see that, tying things together. I do personally think there's challenges when you have modules based, because I even saw this later with some of like Greenwood's modules and books.
Hmm. Hmm.
It can be difficult when there's kind of like a venture based on a novel because you get into that weird paradox of, do the characters do what the people did in the book, or is the DM constrained to force the characters to sort of go down that path of the book?
Hmm.
How railroady is that going to be? And this module wasn't that railroady, thank goodness. I mean, it has a little bit of a reputation of being a railroad, but I think it, again, given the novel tie-in, I think in this case the novel tie-in was a good thing. It didn't hurt the
Yeah,
adventure at all. If nothing
completely.
else, like you being perfect example, it drove attention to it.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I don't know if we mentioned this did appear on Dragon Magazine's 30th greatest D&D adventures of all time list. It was number 25 on their list, and it's number
So
26 on ours. So there's another near miss, right?
almost another direct crossover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not intentional. That's just the way it
Yeah.
worked out.
So
So
and
20
it's funny.
years later, and things are still falling in.
Yeah. So when I did my review of this adventure, I honestly had forgotten how good this adventure was. I mean, this adventure was, I mean, you had the isometric maps,
Oh yeah,
so that's a great.
yeah, Diesel,
Um,
right? That's
yeah, totally,
I
totally.
love those maps. I
Yes,
love when I
you
see those
had
maps.
you the beginning of it was a hex crawl. I mean,
Hmm.
it's definitely a hex crawl. Um, you actually had events. Now, I'll admit the events were not as interesting as I'd like them to be, but there was a whole section of events like on this day, this is going to happen. And it didn't matter where they were on the hex map, they were
Hmm.
going off to the dungeon. So I thought that was interesting. And let's be honest with you, it sounds so simple, but you know what they pulled off with this? They pulled off a dungeon and a dragon. And I know we laugh at that. We laugh at that,
But you
but
don't always get that.
you don't
So
always get that. You don't always get a dungeon and you don't always get a dragon.
yeah,
And that's kind of like, it's the name of the game.
yeah,
And here we are. The game has been out now for almost
yeah.
whatever, it was like 10 years almost, or was out 10 years. And it was a novel approach, like, well, how can we invigorate things and how can we do it? It's like, well, I
Hmm.
got an idea. Let's actually put it in a dungeon and let's actually have a dragon.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, sounds like great ideas and everything. So like I said, we laugh at it, but you get that beautiful cover artwork
Hmm.
that really set the stage. And the final where the dungeon is, the sunken city or the ruined city, it was just, again, we talked about
Yeah.
this in our other
Saxo
shows,
Roth.
different levels, different elevations. It was not just a flat dungeon, and at the bottom of it there was a dragon. That was, I mean, at the very core, that was the basis of Castle White Rock. We wanted a dungeon and we wanted a dragon at the bottom of it. And it's
Yeah.
like, it
Yeah.
sounds so simple now, like, wow, why don't people do that more often?
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's not always as easy
No.
to do, and you want to tell different stories. So
And it's important, I think, to have a strong villain. And in this case, you had a
yeah,
very challenging dragon encounter at the very end of the book. So, kudos to them for and making it a dragon. So
yeah, yeah.
um
So it's a great adventure. And there's a song in this. They actually put the music in there so that you could actually play the music and sing the song. They
yes.
actually encourage one of the player characters to sing the song. And then not only do we just get a song, then there's a canticle at the end of
I
it.
was
There's a
just gonna
canticle of
say
the
that.
dragon.
There was, yeah.
Yeah. So
Um
again, just you look at this and all these different little
yeah.
pieces of things that you know what we forgot to mention, Tracy Hickman again.
Yep.
So I mean, twice
Today
in
must be
one night.
Tracy. Yeah, it's Hickman
Yeah,
night tonight. But you're right. The to be daring enough to put
yeah,
the poetic elements and the
yeah.
song elements in there. I think there was a printing error with the song, so the notes were not on the
Oh,
right
were they? That
bars or
was, so I
something
wouldn't
like
know
that.
because I don't read
I hate to
music.
say it because I never
So
tried to print it, but that's what
yep.
I've heard.
Okay.
But just the sheer audacity to put that song in there, I
Yeah.
think is fantastic. It's such
Yeah.
talk about going above and beyond, when
Yeah.
you're writing an
Yeah.
adventure is to, pen out a song and put that in the, so yeah, kudos to them for that effort.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of noteworthy stuff here
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, and then you throw in the isometric maps. I mean,
Hmm.
it
Yeah,
just, the complete package. I mean,
the
definitely worthy.
complete
This is
package
one
puts it
where
above.
when I was talking earlier in the green room, this one probably should have been on my list, was not on my list,
Yeah.
should probably be on my list. I have no idea what I would take off of my list because I can't, my list is too, I can't, I need to do more. I need a
Yeah,
bigger list. I need to
yeah.
do a top 50
We
list or
kind of
something.
said, before the show, folks, we said in the green room, like, revisiting some of these books or even discovering ones that are more new to us, like when we go into the Warhammer realm and some of these other out of D&D spaces, it really shakes up your list. It shakes up how you,
Yeah.
and yet I still don't want to take my favorites off where I've got them. So it's tough,
So you just make the list bigger.
uh,
That's the answer. Just make the list bigger. So these lists, you're never wrong with these lists. That's the fun part about this and
yeah,
everything. So, all right. So we are up against it. So that was
yeah.
number 26, DL1 Dragons of Despair. So again, and we hope that you folks out there listening along, either on YouTube or live, that maybe you're not familiar with some of these adventures, and maybe this is going to be give
Yeah.
you the gumption to go out and like maybe pick up a PDF or at least go and read an article. There's reviews of almost all these adventures online
Mhm.
where you can get people's opinions on them. Some of them penned decades ago
Mhm.
on the adventures. So hopefully that's what we're doing. Hopefully we're just bringing some awareness, especially to
Yeah, for
some of
sure.
these more outlier ones where as we start
Mhm.
getting down lower and lower to our top 10 lists, you're probably gonna have less and less of these. We're going to be definitely more into the more mainstream one adventures, but
Yeah.
hopefully it just like it encourages us to have a good time and dig into
Mhm.
these a little deeper. Hopefully you folks will do the same. So
Yeah.
so that's all we got for this month. I almost said this week. But we will be back at you. Rick, why don't you tell the folks what you need to tell
Sure.
them?
Well, as Chris mentioned, we're thrilled you could join us. I consider the older I get, I consider time the most valuable resource there is. So thank you for giving us giving us your time for an hour and tuning in and, listening to us chat about these old adventures. If you liked what you saw or watched, please give us a like, give us a follow. If you're watching on YouTube later and you have not subscribed, please do so. It helps us. Our next show will be coming to you on July 28th at 8 p.m. And we will be going back into our list. And now we're getting down to it, folks, because we're going to be
Yes.
hitting number 25 through 21. So now,
Yeah.
like I said, we've cleared away maybe the fluff. I don't know how there could even be fluff when it's a top 50, but we've cleared away the upper level. And we're,
Yeah.
if this is a dungeon, we're now getting into the deeper levels. So
Yep.
this is where it gets good.
getting real. It's getting
Yeah.
real.
For
So,
for this is where the competition gets fierce, you know. This is where the
yes.
modules are really fighting for those positions. So I
So,
hope you can join us again on July 28th. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you all folks with us once again.
yes. Thanks, everybody. And we will be back in the month. Take care.